Kaku! Whether you're into creepy stuff like bats and skeletons, a fan of various products suddenly looking, smelling, or tasting more like pumpkins than usual,
I'm just so happy the pumpkin spice latte!
or you get excited by brand new video games, this is the month for you. So without further ado, here are October 2025's biggest, spookiest, most pumpkin spice game releases. On October 2nd, PS5 gets a big, huge bona fide first-party exclusive in the form of Ghost of Yotei. You probably know the drill here. It's a follow-up to Sucker Punch's 2020 open-world samurai adventure Ghost of Tsushima, but this time it is a whole new part of Japan, a few hundred years later, and it's following a new protagonist named Atsu as she gets revenge on the people who killed her family and left her for dead. If that sounds a lot like Assassin's Creed Shadows, you're not wrong, but it also sounds a lot like Kill Bill and Lady Snowblood. It'll be interesting to see how 2025's big, huge samurai games compare, but having more than one feudal Japanese epic that lets you run around killing people with a katana, definitely not a bad thing. That same day, you can celebrate Mario's 40th birthday with remastered versions of both the Super Mario Galaxy games, which are getting some shiny graphical improvements, along with some quality of life tweaks, such as making the Wii-era motion controls optional. Those are on Switch and Switch 2, and you can buy them in a physical 2-pack or grab digital versions individually. On the 3rd, there's Digimon Story Time Stranger. Unlike that other game series about collecting and training monsters, the folks at Bandai Namco haven't exactly been churning these out, and this is the first new entry in the Digimon Story RPG sub-series in almost a decade, so it's going to be interesting to see how it's evolved in that time. That's coming to PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Still in the 3rd, there's Castle of Heart Retold, which is a revamped version of the 2018 dark fantasy action platformer, which got some pretty dismal reviews the first time around, so maybe this will improve the experience, but if you're dying to find out, you could do so on PS5, PC, Xbox Series, and both the Switches. On the 7th, Captured comes to Xbox Series, which is the first-person horror game seen through a missing kid's camcorder and set in seemingly endless repeating hallways that get weirder as you go, so somewhere between PT and Paranormal Activity. I maintain that everything is automatically creepier in a flashlight beam or through a camcorder lens, and this supports my theory. Still on the 7th is King of Meat, a co-op party platformer that looks like equal parts Fall Guys, Dungeon Defenders, and Smash TV, and you and up to 3 friends will be tasked with surviving chaotic levels designed by other players. That's on PC, Xbox Series, and PS5. On the 9th, Absolum comes to PC, both PlayStations and Switch, which is a roguelite beat-em-up with some really gorgeous hand-drawn animation, and also frogs, which are always good. Not enough frogs in games if you ask me. You didn't ask me, but I'm just letting you know. My birthday's coming up, I'd like a frog. Please don't get me frogs, I'm only kidding. Also that day, if you ever wish that we got an over-the-garden-wall video game while you're not alone, and Buy Sweet Carole looks to be the next best thing, this narrative horror game is also clearly paying homage to some classic animated films, specifically the ones that had creepy parts that scarred generations of children. I'm in. That's on PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. On the 10th, Battlefield 6 sees EA and DICE's beloved shooter hopefully make a return to form, and the early buzz seems to be that it feels a lot like Battlefield 3 and 4, which are some of the high points in the series. The class system makes a return, but it no longer restricts which weapons each class can use, which should add a whole new layer of strategy when picking loadouts, and means that I can give my friends little medicine pouches while shooting things with a bazooka. That's on PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. If you're tired of games where you run around shooting guns to destroy things, well, I have got the game for you. In Dreams of Another, you run around shooting guns and for some reason it creates stuff instead of destroying it. This is from the folks who made the Pixel Junk games, but it looks exceptionally out there. That's on PC and PS5, where you can play it the old-fashioned way, or with a PlayStation VR 2 if you have one of those things lying around. Still on October 10th, Snoopy and the Great Mystery Club is a new adventure game starring Charles Schultz's iconic cast of characters, which looks to feature puzzles and mini-games and probably a healthy dash of chronic depression. That's on PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. Good grief. If you'd like to see a bunch of weirdly proportioned children fumble around in considerably bleaker settings, Little Nightmares 3 arrives that same day as well. This franchise is something of a familiar concept at this point, but the latest installment is developed by Supermassive Games, who you probably know for their scary games about realistic adults getting hurt, like Until Dawn and the Dark Pictures anthology, so interested to see what awful fate they have in store for these creepy little kids. That one's coming to everything. If you missed the first Little Nightmares, that's getting an enhanced edition for Xbox Series, PS5, Switch 2, and PC, and it's totally worth checking out because it's basically Spirited Away if it had been directed by the FromSoft Miyazaki instead of the Studio Ghibli one. On October 15th, there's Ball X Pit, which is, according to the official description, a brick-breaking, ball-fusing, base-building survival roguelite, and seeing it in action has me thinking it might be stupidly addictive in a similar vein to Balatro, Vampire Survivors, or Demon's Tilt, so if you're trying to make your brain squirt out some of the nice chemicals, something tells me this might help produce a steady drip. That's on Xbox Series and PC, with a Switch 2 version coming later this fall. On October 16th, Pokemon Legends ZA continues the historically turn-based RPG franchise's venture into real-time combat, building on the systems that were established in Arceus and turning players loose in the more contemporary metropolis of Lumio City, which is loosely based on Paris. Looking up interesting things to say about this game took me down a rabbit hole of what Pokemon are called in France, and I'm pleased to report that Psyduck is called Psycho Quack, Slowbro is called Flagados, Jigglypuff is called Rondoodoo, and Haunter is just called Spectrum, all of which is very funny to me. Highly recommend looking up Pokemon names in other languages because it will make you realize what Pokemon fans sound like to people who don't know about Pokemon. Legends ZA is on both Switches. On the 16th, Reach hits all the major VR headsets, not to be confused with the Halo game or the Toothpaste. This is an immersive cinematic action game, and as the name suggests, it involves some pretty grand set pieces that may or may not involve you physically extending your arms to grab stuff. Sorry, was that joke too much of a stretch? On the 17th, Double Fine is back with Keeper, a weird-as-hell looking adventure game that kinda looks like if Howl's Moving Castle and the bird from Up got their hands on a DMT pen and decided to watch The Dark Crystal. I assure you, I mean that in a flattering way. That one's coming to Xbox Series and PC. If you want something a little less wackadoo and out there, rest assured that Kaku Ancient Seal hits PS5 and Xbox Series that day as well, which is what can only be described as an open-world action-adventure combining exploration with puzzles and dynamic combat. I mean, you could probably find other more interesting ways to describe it, but that's what it says on the Steam page, where it's been available since last year. October 21st is a stupidly stacked day for game releases. There's Ninja Gaiden 4, a sequel 13 years in the making, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, a sequel 21 years in the making, and Jurassic World Evolution 3, the sequel to 2 games based on a movie series that was originally advertised as an adventure 65 million years in the making. One of those games is about ninjas, one is about vampires, and one is about dinosaurs, and I bet you could figure out which is which. In any case, those are all on Xbox Series, PS5, and PC. Meanwhile, that day as well, there's also Painkiller, which is a modern reimagining of the 2004 shooter from People Can Fly. The new version features 3-player co-op, which looks like good old-fashioned big, dumb, loud fun. You can go to hell on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series and shoot stuff while you're there. If you'd rather play a game that is about insects, there's also Isopod, a webbed spin-off, which is a 3D platformer starring a roly-poly pillbug, which is on PC that day as well. If you've been aching for a good old-fashioned Telltale-style adventure game, mark your calendars because October 22nd, Dispatch drops its first 2 episodes on PC and PS5. This is a superhero workplace comedy game with a phenomenal voice cast developed by Ad Hoc Studios, which was founded by a bunch of ex-Telltale devs, and it'll be getting an episodic release with 2 episodes dropping each week over the course of 4 weeks. Just like a TV show! Speaking of workplace games, if you're getting tired of punching the old time clock in Factorio or Satisfactory, another game of that sort is coming down the assembly line. On the 22nd, Modulus hits early access on Steam, and if you get in on the ground floor, you're gonna be running the whole operation in no time. If you're looking to earn some extra dough by doing side quests in your off hours, look no further than Moonlighter 2, The Endless Vault, which hits early access on the 23rd. This is the follow-up to the 2018 indie hit in which you were an RPG shopkeeper by day and an aspiring adventurer in your spare time. Still on the 23rd, there's Becastled. This cozy castle builder with a side of tower defense has been in early access since 2021, and now it's finally getting a version 1.0 on PC, and it's coming to all the consoles that day as well. If you want to leave the hustle and bustle of modern life behind and go live off the land like you're in a Laura Ingalls Wilder book,
whenever you stick your nose in the air with me, Nellie, it's gonna get punched.
Bounty Star might be for you. You can build a farm, raise some crops, and lay waste to your enemies in a heavily weaponized mech suit, just like they did in the olden days. A lot of people don't know this, but the Little House on the Prairie series is canonically part of Mobile Suit Gundam's Universal Century timeline. Prove me wrong. Anyway, Bounty Star hits the Xbox's PlayStation and PC on the 23rd. Still that day is Full Metal Schoolgirl, which follows heavily armed cybernetic teenagers as they beat up a bunch of robotic businessmen with high-tech weaponry. That's on PS5, Switch 2, and PC. If you'd prefer to beat up a bunch of street punks with your bare hands, that day is also Double Dragon Revive, the modernized spin on the classic arcade beat-em-up. That's on basically everything. Finally that day, the now classic 2009 tower defense Plants vs. Zombies gets a modern overhaul and re-release in Replanted, which is slowly shambling onto everything. On October 24th, the long-dormant Katamari Damacy series gets its first new installment in over a decade with Once Upon a Katamari, which involves going back in time and rolling up a bunch of shit from throughout history into a giant ball, collecting some power-ups along the way, and also meeting the Prince of All Cosmos' weird-looking cousins. That's on PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. Another game about stuff that rolls around is Hot Wheels Let's Race Ultimate Speed, a racing game tie-in to the Netflix animated series that kinda looks like somebody modded Cocomelon into Cyberpunk 2077. That's on PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. On October 29th, you can go blast off into the Outer Worlds 2, Obsidian's sophomore and possibly sophomoric expedition into post-capitalist outer space, which boasts plenty of weird weaponry and will likely reward or punish your best and worst decision-making in wild and wacky ways. If you like shooting stuff without having to weigh the moral ramifications thereof, Arc Raiders drops on the 30th. This third-person extraction shooter comes from Embark Studios, who gave us the finals, and based on early buzz, it seems like it has some potential to eat Escape from Tarkov's lunch and possibly nibble on some of Marathon's snacks as well. That one's coming to Xbox Series, PS5, and PC. On October 30th, Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake gives the classic JRPGs a nice glow-up that elevates the iconic sprite art based on Akira Toriyama's designs while retaining all the original charm. I've never been able to get into Dragon Quest, the video games, but I've always loved the monsters, and that is a good enough excuse to show you one of my favorite pieces of video game merch ever made. Get a load of this. It's a mummy from Dragon Quest, but check it out. It's also a tissue dispenser. It's a real thing. They actually put that out. It's an official thing. The weird part is, though, they also make one that's shaped like a slime, but it's a soap dispenser. Theoretically a soap dispenser, though you could probably also put lotion in there. Anyway, that's coming to PC, PS5, Xbox Series, and both the Switches. The video game, I mean, not the tissue dispenser. Finally, on October 30th, it is a Gauls Night Out in Asterix and Obelix Mission Babylon, the latest video game based on the long-running French comic strip. This one is a platformer for 1 to 2 players, and it's on Switch, Xbox Series, PS5, and PC. A few weeks ago, we published our video rounding up the big game releases that are still coming in 2025, which was never intended to cover all of them, but to cover most of them, and one that we totally forgot to mention was Mina the Hollower, which is absolutely a big game, worthy of your attention. Yacht Club Games made a name for themselves with Shovel Knight, and if that was their Mario, Mina is shaping up to be their Zelda. It's clearly taking cues from Link's Awakening, with just a splash of Castlevania thrown in there for good measure. Yacht Club has released 9 games in the last decade that have the word shovel in the title, and if it concerns you that this one doesn't, rest assured that Mina the Hollower still involves digging holes in the ground. That one is coming to everything. If you want something pixelated that has a lot more colors on screen at once, even if most of those colors are varying shades of gray, blue, and orange, set your sights on Terminator 2D No Fate. This adapts James Cameron's action masterpiece into a faux retro Contra-like side-scroller. I don't know what else to say about this game that isn't immediately apparent seeing it in action, but the title does remind me of one of my all-time career highlights. I interviewed the cast of Terminator Dark Fate at Comic-Con, and during the outro I slipped in the iconic Sarah Connor quote, "No fate but what we make for ourselves," and Linda Hamilton, who was sitting next to me, turned and gave me this look of adoration, and then she pinched me on the cheek like she was my aunt who came to visit. Have you ever been pinched on the cheek by Sarah Connor? Better question, have you watched Terminator 2 recently? Because a movie about a single mom taking down an AI tech company has aged like a fine wine. Terminator 2D No Fate is coming to everything. We are at the tail end of this video, which is the perfect place to tell you that Tales of Xillia Remastered is coming to PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. This is a modern updo of the 13th entry in the long-running JRPG series, originally released back in 2011. This is not to be confused with Trails in the Sky, first chapter, which came out last month and was also a redo of an older game in the long-running JRPG series. Would you believe I have gotten these franchises confused in the past? Maybe I should be put on trial. Or perhaps Trials, that motorcycle game that they used to make a lot of. Folks, we did it. We got through all the big releases in maybe the biggest release month of the year. It is entirely possible that next month is even bigger, and I'll be back in just a matter of weeks to round up all of those games, or as many of them as we can fit into the video. But for now, the usual big, huge thank you to Amanda Medina, Chris Del Padre, and Logan Plant for helping these videos come together as smoothly as they do. And an even bigger thank you to everybody who takes the time to watch them, because it would be pretty stupid if we spent all this time making them and nobody watched them. I'll see you next month, everybody. Boo!